this. What we're trying to do here, are you underway? Thank you. Welcome to the second week. This week is thinking about how the rest of humanity lives. And I want to start you off. Are you an Australian? Are you happy about that? Do you realise you're one of the richest people in the earth?
I'm not sure about that personally.
Okay, but I can tell you, you are. You know, like if you go around the world, probably you're richer than 95% of them. We're incredibly well off here, incredibly well off. Whether we're going to stay like that's another question, but right now we are. Because of that, we use a lot of the world's resources and we're squandering them. But what we're really thinking about in terms of integrated human studies is how many people live in Australia? How many Australians are there?
24 million.
Okay, 24 million? I'm not sure. There's 23, 24, 20, you know, every time you wake up there's a few more. But it's in that order. How many people live in this world? Oops. 7. Okay, 7 billion. The next question I always ask is how many in a billion? How many in a billion? What's a billion? 100 million. 1,000 million? Have I made the point? Most people will say that. Many people, and some people will say a million. And if there's a million people in a billion, my God, we're in a mess. Real mess. What I'm really getting at is in integrated human studies, you've got to start to think about some of these fundamental figures and have them ready to answer. Not many, but it gives you a much better appreciation of the real problems in this world. Of that 7 billion, there's 7,000 million people. Did I get that right? How many are pretty rich and fat and affluent? Eat too much. Carrying too much fat. How many would you say? 2%. Sorry? 2%. 2%? More. Would you believe 1 billion people are eating too much? How many people haven't got enough to eat? Sorry? Well, eating too much. I may not be rich, but generally it goes hand in hand, more or less. How many people haven't got enough to eat such that their lives will be curtailed or they'll be sick? 4 billion. They say about 1 billion, really in a bad pace of nutrition. So we've got a billion too obese, and we've got 1 billion not eating enough. That's crazy. So I started to tell you a little bit about how people live in this world. Who has travelled to India? Anyone? Or comes from India? Did you enjoy it? I love India. But there's a lot of poverty. Enormous amount of poverty and a lot of happiness. Travelled to Africa. Anyone been to Africa? Parts of Africa? Okay. Anyone from Africa? Great. Whereabouts? Cape Town. So you know a fair bit about how people live there. And you've seen the rich and the poor and the divide. Australia has rich and poor. Nowhere near that divide, but the divide is increasing. So this today is meant to be getting you to think about the rest of the world, not just yourselves, but the rest of humanity, and think about their well-being. Sorry about this, but you've got a family and, you know, you're probably pretty well off, and you are. Everyone here is well off. Even to come to university, you're well off. If I told your family, I'm terribly sorry, your income's going to be divided by 2, would that cause stress? Yeah. 4 times? Yeah. But yet, most of the world lives on 10% of your parents' salary, or less. Is that telling us something? If I suddenly got your family and cut your income down to 1/10 of what it is, I think you'd probably collapse. Your feeling of well-being would be shot. And yet other people living on 10% of your income would state that they've got a feeling of well-being. So what's this thing called well-being? Sorry, I'm going in and out of the picture. Not to worry. Are you are you happy? Have you got a state of well-being?
Yeah.
Good. Why do you say that? And what is well-being to you?
Sense of security.
Sorry?
Sense of security.
Security? What about you? You more or less pretty happy? Why are you happy, and what's the most important thing conditioning your happiness?
Food, shelter, family.
Okay, food, shelter, family. Family. What does that mean? Do you mean relationships?
Yeah.
Would you be happy with just food and shelter? And security, which is wrapped up in that a bit?
Not now that I know I have family and they're taking it away. Maybe if you never had it, it'd be easier.
Okay, so taking away gives unhappiness. You on Facebook?
Yes.
You got a bunch of friends on Facebook?
Yeah.
How many?
100 and something.
That's garbage. We're going to hear about that later. None of us can have 100 friends by definition of friends who we really trust, could tell our innermost circle, I'm in trouble.
That's Facebook.
Yeah, so Facebook concept of friend, I always get upset about it. It's a mythical, abstract concept.
IHS has got 150 friends.
I'm in trouble here. What we just heard in the background, and I'm trying to keep it in the background, is that Mark said that if you're a friend on Facebook with IHS, it's 150 of you. Well, yes, Mark, in a way, I'd love to think you really are friends, and even if you're not intimate friends, you've got a sense of community, and that would be good. But okay, we'll go into that later. I'm tongue-tied. So well-being can have something to do with relationships and human well-being. There's security, there's food, which if we lack, we are distressed because we could die, and that certainly isn't well-being. But other things like friendship and maybe education, music, there's all sorts of other things that come into our feeling of well-being very often. And what I really want you to do today is move into your groups, and I've set you those specific questions to talk about that. In Australia, we are very, very lucky. Number one, we've got almost the highest material standard of living in the world, and yet our politicians are telling us you're doing it tough. I talked about this. How come in such a wealthy, affluent nation, many of us are not all that happy? Or we're told not to be happy, because if we're told not to be happy, the politician says, my God, you're unhappy, you're in a bad way, but I can help you, vote for me. So a lot of this sort of stuff gets bred into our ways of thinking, where we don't stand back and say, my golly, how lucky we are. And then the next step is, maybe I'm a human. I'm a globalized human. And I'm really happy that all Australians are happy. But shouldn't I perhaps be happier still if all the world was happy? Have you ever asked those sort of questions? They're a fairly new question, these questions. They haven't been around until the last 2 centuries, because basically until the last 2 centuries, we hardly knew anything about other people. We knew that there were sailing ships and things like that, but we weren't really intimately involved with other people. Now with television and everything else, we really are part of a global community. And many of us feel that that global community is part of us. We're not just Australians, we're part of the global community. In which case, if there are people in poverty, whatever, we should perhaps be thinking about doing something for them. And not just thinking about us, little Australians. Or, I'm actually more narrow-minded, as us people living in Perth and Hang, the eastern states. That's their problem. We want Western Australia to be flourishing. And you hear people talk about that. Have I stretched you too far? Okay, in your groups, start thinking about well-being. And the best way to start off in integrated human studies is not abstract. Don't go to a book. Don't even think about the globe, it's too big. Think about you. What conditions your well-being? Then start to think in the group, is there anything universal about well-being you can start to assemble? And then you can start thinking about what global well-being means. Happy with that? Okay, go for it. I'll be interested to see what you think at the end of it all. Thanks for that.